Okay, we'll reconvene for our meeting. Thank you. It's Thursday, April 20th, 2023, the Ross Board of Education meeting. Could everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Kunkel, would you like to review the agenda, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. Just some highlights for tonight's agenda. Asking the board to approve the year one reductions if the levy fails. Item 2, there are some policies for your approval. Third item, there is an teacher MOU for a job share. There are personnel schedules, and then there's investments and treasurer's report under Mrs. Logan's section. Would any board members like a separate vote of those items on the agenda?
Yes, I request a separate vote for letter A,
Under what section?
under number 7, superintendent's reports and recommendations.
7A. Okay, anything else? Now we need to vote to approve that, right? Yep. Could we have a first to approve the agenda, please?
Motion.
Mr. Chanel? Could we have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Hayes? Mrs. Logan, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Schnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Kleinfelter?
Yes.
Mrs. Webb?
Yes.
Mr. Van Winkle?
Yes. Okay, we'll move on to number 5, the approval of March 13th, 2023 board meeting. I'm sorry, the meeting was April 20th. Our regular meeting for the minutes. Can we have a first to approve that, please?
Motion.
Can we have a second?
Second.
Could you please call the roll, Ms. Logan?
Mr. Schnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Kleinfelter?
Yes.
Mrs. Webb?
Yes.
Mr. Van Winkle?
Yes. We have one public participation, is that correct? Okay. Do you have the mic, Jake? Oh, there it is.
Thank you, sir.
Karen Burwinkle, if you could come up. Karen lives at 140, I'll just do this for you, 1401 Millville Shandon Road. She wants to talk about some recent public survey.
Sorry, it's
Regarding
hard to read.
Calendars,
It's
yeah.
regarding the school calendars. Yeah.
Perfect,
So I
yeah.
emailed
So-
all of you guys.
Yep,
Yes.
you have up to 3 minutes.
Okay.
If and Mrs. Hayes is, or Mrs. Webb's going to time you. When there's about 30 seconds left, she'll put her hand in the air, but don't feel like you need to cut yourself short. If you need to go over and get your point across, we obviously are not going to interrupt you, so,
If you guys want to share that.
thank you.
Perfect. So I recently emailed some of you guys, and I got some very good responses, so I appreciate those. They were very informative. But I also felt like I couldn't help but wonder how other families in the Ross community felt. After talking to several of my friends and their families, they were not very happy with the approved calendars. So I created and put out a very simple survey just asking the community how they felt about the approved calendars. And I shared the results with you. So it was about 70% disapproval from what I saw. And so about 70% were not happy with the approved calendars. Almost 80% were not happy with the start dates of the calendars. And I asked the simple question if they would prefer a later start date with less days off, and 80% said yes. So I know in the past we've gone from historically kind of a mid-August start date. Not that I was particularly happy about that, but I think people were okay with that. I feel like we've now pushed to what we would consider to be an early August start date, and I think that's kind of where we've pushed the community overboard. I don't think they're very happy with it being an early August start date, especially the calendar year that starts August 8th. To me, that was quite a shock. I was not expecting that, and I just don't really think that that's a great week to start school. Within this packet that I gave you, there is also a list of different comments that people put forth, some specifically talking about working families and having difficulty finding childcare on the other days off that aren't included in a normal school year. A lot of people said they were losing our summer. It doesn't accommodate the rural kids. That was one comment that kind of spoke to me. And then, I'm assuming it's a teacher, this was an anonymous survey, but that the breaks are disruptive to learning. I myself felt like my own kids kind of got out of the habit of going to school because we'd have a 5-day week and then a 4-day week and then a 5-day week, and then it was kind of difficult to get them used to a regular school week. And then the final page is actually a list of a bunch of different school districts in the area. And I thought it was very interesting that we are one of 3 districts that go back as early as August 10th. A lot of the other ones, on average, go back between the 15th and the 17th, kind of that next week. And then there's even some schools that start back later than that next week. And I also thought it was very surprising that the top 3 are kind of some high-ranking schools. So I think it's interesting to look at that and see that other high-ranking schools are choosing to start back later. So I guess I'm just asking the administration and the board members to reconsider the calendar year that was approved and take into consideration how the community feels for those 2 calendars and any future calendars. Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't even try hard. I didn't share anything myself. I didn't ask friends. I didn't reach out. I just posted on Rumble. So it's a very general. You had some people who were for it, some people who were against it. I don't have the names. It's completely anonymous. So that was there's 106 responses. 106, and then there's one question that I put up late because I realized I wasn't clear what I was asking, so I put it up after about 20 responses, so it only has 82 responses. But in general, it's 106 responses, and roughly 70, 80% of the community kind of not okay with the calendar. Any other questions?
No, you're good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in. We will move on. No other public participation. Mr. Casader.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Karen, I appreciate you putting this information together, and I know it probably took a lot of time and work, especially like this last page. So, yeah, I think it helps us too, just seeing the comparative analysis of the school districts that surround us, and always welcome that community support and appreciate this information.
Interesting in my research, I found Lakota schools, and there was one other. They actually have a place where you can input or a community can submit their suggestions and vote on the calendar.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Kind of how they did it, but I saw it there on the side of the top.
Well, this is good discussion topics. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any comments? Okay, we'll move on to number 7. Dr. Kunkel, the floor is yours.
Yes, sir. So item 7A is the 1-year reduction plan if the levy fails, and that will be a separate vote.
Okay. Can we get a first under superintendent's recommendations? Under A, can we get a first for that, please?
Motion.
Mr. Kleinfelder? Can we get a second?
Second.
Mr. Chanel? Do we have any discussion on that topic? Nobody?
I would just say that, this is sickening to vote on. I feel nauseous sitting here. We've talked with Dr. Kunkel about changes, and we've talked, this is what the work has been done and presented as, what is the best, it's like the best of the bad, I guess you could say. I'm just, as a nurse, I'm, like the loss of the school nurses, the loss of music, but none of them, it's not like any one of them is not, I'm trying to say, cutting any of them is bad. And I understand we have to have a balanced budget, but I just wanted the community to know that this isn't, it's not an easy decision. It's not something that we take lightly, and that we have sought input, and this is the recommendations that you guys have made. And I appreciate the effort that you guys have done.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Kleinfelder?
No one wants to cut anything, and no one wants to pay more taxes. But the reality is, we have to live within our budget, and to do so, this is going to be a necessary evil to make that happen. So let's all vote yes.
Any other comments?
So for me, and I'm going to kind of echo what Heather said a little bit, but, none of it's good. It's all ugly. And I understand that, we do have to make cuts. That's going to have to happen. It's going to be really hard to cut our way out of this. We really do have to pass that levy in May, but I've really, really struggled with this decision over the last couple of days, still not even, knowing how I'm going to vote up until the board meeting, I guess. And my thing is, when it starts to cut into academics and experiences for the kids, that's where I have to, I don't know, I just, everybody's important. All these positions are important. School nurses are important. Everybody is, but it's a struggle. It's a hard decision. And I know that you guys have put a lot of work and invested a lot of time and have, examined so many different things. And so it's obviously nothing against any of the work that's been done, but I just wanted to speak my piece, I guess, if you will.
You good? Okay. Mrs. Logan, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Kleinfelter,
Yes.
Mr. Schnell,
Yes.
Mrs. Hayes,
Yes.
Mrs. Webb,
No.
Mr. Van Winkle.
Yes. Okay.
Hi, Mr. President. The next items, B through D, I'd like to block those together. B are the policies for your approval. C is a job share, like I said before, and D are personnel schedules, A, C, D, and E in the attachment. So B through D as a block, please.
Perfect. Under superintendent's recommendations, it's letter B through D. Can I have a first, please?
Motion.
Mr. Chanel, can we please have a second?
Second?
Mrs. Hayes? Mrs. Logan, could you call the roll?
Mr. Schnell,
Yes.
Mrs. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Kleinfelter,
Yes.
Mrs. Webb,
Yes.
Mr. Van Winkle.
Yes. And we'll move on to treasurer's reports and recommendations. Floor is yours, Mrs. Logan.
Thank you. So, under my section, A through E, I would ask for one vote, one block vote. We have investments and treasurer's reports, which are typical to the agenda. You will see an amended contract for services, adding 40 additional hours for O&M services. And then item D is approving an insurance agreement for our electronic devices in the district. So I think a lot of you are aware, quite a few of our devices, some of the parts, we're just unable to even get to fix them. But what this agreement would do, it's an insurance agreement on the devices and would allow us a better way of handling that whole process. And then item D are donations.
Okay, underneath the treasurer's reports and recommendations, A through E, could we have a first, please?
Motion.
Mr. Chanel, could we have a second?
Second?
Mrs. Hayes? Mrs. Logan, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Kleinfelter,
Yes.
Mrs. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Schnell,
Yes.
Mrs. Webb,
Yes.
Mr. Van Winkle.
Yes. We're going to bounce around a little bit here. We're going to go Butler Tech report first, Mr. Kleinfelder.
All right, well, Butler Tech met Tuesday. I have shared with you the two student success newsletter from last month and this month, because I think we met after our meeting the other day in March, so I have both that. If you look on the April edition, you do see board member Amy Webb on the front cover. She was a 2023 Empower Award winner. She was honored at the board meeting the other night with her whole family. She had Molly Jo there for Administrator of the Year. And Chef Simpson, after the meeting, they were recognized at the very beginning. They went to Cafe Lee, all the families of the 7 recipients, and they got to eat probably a fantastic meal prepared by Chef Simpson over in Cafe Elite. I also have in front of all of you the agenda card for the all board meetings, even though the deadline is passed. If you plan on attending, you can still register up through this week. That is student showcase. It is, when is the dang thing? May 3rd. 4 to 8 student showcases. That's pretty neat. You get to see all the senior projects, things they're working on. And they're going to have a board member team activity in the lobby, kind of a little thing, and then another dinner for everyone prepared by the culinary arts students. They do a fantastic job with that. And then a brief concert by the School of the Arts to follow that. If you haven't gone before, it's a pretty good deal for that. Also remind everyone their senior ceremony is May 15th at Cintas Center, Xavier University at 7. I will be there representing Ross on stage, and if anybody else wants to come, they're more than welcome to. And that's all I have.
Okay. We do not have a legislative report this evening. We'll move to board comments, and we'll start with Mrs. Webb.
I don't have any comments. Thank you, Mr. Van
No
Winkle.
problem.
Oh,
Mrs.
wait, you know what? I
Hayes?
do have one. I
Okay,
do have
go
one.
ahead.
I apologize.
You can-
So I just wanted to let everybody know we have a group of kiddos from Ross High School traveling to Orlando tomorrow. There's 3 of them, and they're traveling for, it's called DECA, which is a marketing organization, and they got #1 in the state of Ohio, this group. So now they're going to go compete at an international competition in Orlando this week. So we head out tomorrow.
Good luck.
So I wanted to commend those kids.
Wish them luck, yeah.
Yep.
Mrs. Hayes?
I just wanted to thank Mrs. Burwinkle for this, the effort that she did and speaking for providing this list. It is something to delve into and talk more about when looking at this list. Thank you.
Mr. Schnell?
Just thank all of the presenters at our work session today. Although looks like they're all gone.
75 degrees out.
Yeah, exactly. The cuts, I mean, it's not fun. This is the 3rd or 4th time we've had to make cuts like that. Not pleasant, and if we don't get this levy passed, it's going to unfortunately continue, so that's all I have.
Yep. Mr. Kleinfelder?
Jump on, thanks to the presenters. Look forward to seeing that All Champions Day with the students paired up there. That would be a pretty cool event, and that's all I have.
Okay. On a positive, I want to thank Mrs. Miller, Mrs. Rudolph, Mr. Perry, Mrs. Smith, and Mrs. Elam. On a positive note, our district and community and parents and teachers and everybody has been through a lot over the last year and a half, 2 years. But the one thing that's been extremely positive is the people for Yes for Ross. It's really been neat to see the stories. I try to stay on Facebook, but you hear about it when you're a board member. But just the stories of positivity and coming from everybody, people who've lived here forever, who don't have kids in the district, and parents who do, and community members and alumni, just the positivity, irregardless of what happens, fingers crossed, but it is nice to know that we have some incredible people in this community, and I'm extremely proud to be part of it and live in this community, and I have faith in the community, but I also understand the difficulties. So we always talk about some doom and gloom, and I wanted to say something really positive because we got some really, really good people in this community. So it doesn't go unnoticed. I know sometimes they feel like they're in quicksand or trying to run up the hill in snow, but it's really neat just to see all the positive people in our community. So with that being said, can we have a motion to adjourn the meeting? First, please.
Motion.
Mr. Chanel, a second? Second. Mrs. Hayes, could you please call the roll, Mrs. Logan?
Mr. Schnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Kleinfelter,
Yes.
Mrs. Webb,
Yes.
Mr. Van Winkle.